A transgender chief executive of a rape crisis centre has resigned following a damning report which found it had failed to protect women-only spaces. Mirudal Wadhar, who was appointed CEO of the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre in 2021, quit after a report commissioned by Rape Crisis Scotland found there had been a failure to set professional standards of behaviour. Well, we're joined now by the Director for Women of Scotland, Marion Calder. Thanks so much for joining us, Marion. This is a very, very interesting case, and a lot of people will be asking the question, given that a rape crisis centre for victims of sexual assault really should be a women's only space, why was it being run by a man for so long?
Well, as you correctly stated, it all started back in 2021 when Rape Crisis Edinburgh put an advert out to hire a new chief executive. And that advert quite clearly stated it was looking for a female. But then for whatever reason, Mirudal, who is a male, decided to apply for the job. And then he was successful and was put in position. So fast forward to May this year, there was a tribunal case taken by a member of staff at Edinburgh Rape Crisis by her name being Ros Adams. Now, Ros, being quite sensible, thought it was that females, users of the service, rape victims, should actually know the sex of the individual that's actually giving the counselling service. Now, at that time, Mirudal was employed, Mirudal is a male, and there was also a non-binary member of staff who was a female, but didn't actually identify as being male or female. So you can understand why Ros was actually asking the question. Now, Ros was successful in her tribunal, and off the back of that, Rape Crisis Scotland commissioned an independent survey into the actions of Edinburgh Rape Crisis, and this report came out on Thursday, and it was utterly damning.
Now, am I right in thinking that Wadhar, in a podcast, I believe it was the Guilty Feminist podcast, had said in an interview that women who were victims of rape could be bigots too, and that if they were asking for female-only spaces, that they needed to reframe their trauma? I hope I'm not misquoting there. Can you just clarify for me?
You're not misquoting at all. And in fact, he was actually suggesting that anyone requesting the sex of an individual shouldn't be, why is it necessary? And they should be educated. So no, you haven't misquoted at all. So this individual's views, Mirudal's views, have been known for years within Scotland. I mean, this is an activist. This is a trans activist. So everyone has been aware that this is a male that wants to be kind of the rest of the public to actually see him as female. But he has been feted by the SNP. In fact, he was actually put forward to actually stand under, to be an MSP, MP, councillor, and also subsequently the Greens. So he is quite infamous, shall we say, in Scotland for his views about women like myself and others, and males who actually believe that sex is biological and it cannot be changed. And in a service like Rape Crisis, it should absolutely be female only.
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? I mean, you know, if this were a case that this individual were applying for a job at the library or a job at the, I don't know, Tropical Fish Centre or whatever it might be, and they were discriminated against on the basis of their biological sex, then I think there would be a strong case there. But we're talking about a rape crisis centre. There are good reasons, good legal reasons why discrimination by sex is perfectly legitimate in those cases, surely.
It is. I mean, there is Schedule 9 under the Quality Act that allows services like Rape Crisis and/or Women's Aid to employ females only, and it quite categorically says this post is only available to women under Schedule 9 of the Quality Act. Yet he applied for it. Now, that was wrong, but the point being is he was hired. That's not his fault. That was those that sat on the board that put him in that position.
Well, can I ask about that? Because, you know, that sounds very much like the fault lies with those people at the Rape Crisis Centre. The board of whoever it was responsible for the employment. But in addition to that, the SNP has taken a rather odd attitude about all of this. Do you think that they were hiring Wadhar to make a political point?
It certainly feels like that, and certainly the women in Scotland feel like that. I mean, the previous First Minister stated that our views were not valid, and certainly what we found in Ros Adams' case, that those who had complained to Edinburgh Rape Crisis and/or Rape Crisis Scotland, their emails had been put in a hate folder. So their views weren't valid. So Edinburgh Rape Crisis were not taking on the views of women, stating that this was inappropriate, that they wanted to know the sex of the individual that's giving them counselling, and were just completely and utterly discounted. So we ask, and we're requesting, have stated, as has J.K. Rowling, that there needs to be an urgent review of the board at Edinburgh Rape Crisis and of Rape Crisis Scotland.
Well,
because
now that this decision, sorry, Marion, now that this decision has been made, and of course, as we all know, J.K. Rowling had to set up Byra's Place, the only rape crisis centre in Scotland that is for women only. But do you think now, given this development, things are moving in the right direction? Maybe in Scotland things can get a little better when it comes to women's rights. Are you, in other words, heartened by what's happened?
I wouldn't say heartened. I think that women in Scotland have felt utterly destroyed over the revelations that this report came out with last Thursday. It has basically confirmed everything that we've been saying, whether that has been to rape crisis themselves and or to politicians, Scottish government across everywhere. Even though we managed to get rid of self-ID, it still has infiltrated, this ideology has infiltrated every aspect of society here. But the fact that it infiltrated so badly into rape crisis just shows how, unfortunately, we're going to have a lot of weeding out to do over the next few years. And I think the repercussions of this report and of Rape Crisis Scotland's decision was it basically sits with them as the board and the chief executive, Sandy Brindley. I think the report is going to have ripples and waves for very many months to come. And next month will be the remedy hearing for the individual Ros Adams. So again, it's not going away. So this will continue on and on and on. So we would request an urgent review be taken out by government into all women's sector organisations that receive funding for them to make sure this never happens again.
Well, Marion, I'm sure that this is something that, as you say, is going to continue, and I hope you'll be able to come back on the show to discuss it more. Marion Calder from 4 Women Scotland, thank you very much for joining me.